Welcome to the American Market Alchemist podcast and YouTube channel. Christina Robuffet brought us here, and I'm very excited to be interviewing Tristan Laurent, who is also here in Grenoble, like I am, and very excited to have you on the episode. Tristan, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. So just a little story about how we came into contact. On LinkedIn, I put out a call for entrepreneurs and startups based in the Grenoble area because I want to feature Grenoble and I want to make Grenoble the hot spot to be. So that means really reaching out and telling stories about all of the great entrepreneurs and the companies that are doing exciting things in the US market and who are in or from Grenoble. And Tristan said, "Hey, that's me." And I said, "Great, let's talk about it." And Tristan, can you tell me a little bit just about who you are and what you do? Who's your company? What do you guys do?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So actually, I was born in Grenoble, and
Oh,
then
right. Okay.
I did most of my studies there,
Yeah.
and then actually my very last year I went to Kansas to do
Oh, right.
is kind of a double degree with the University of Kansas. So I did an MBA there.
Hmm.
and
Great.
um, and that's how I got to learn not only how to speak proper English, I guess,
Yeah.
but also got tons of met tons of very interesting people, and really got into what eventually became not just a passion but like really my entire career, the space
Yeah.
industry. So that was back
Mm.
in 2012, and it was when really kind of the space industry started to get hot with Elon Musk investing
Mm.
lots of millions into SpaceX with
Yeah.
the goal of sending people to Mars, and I thought that's pretty cool, and I want to be a part of it. So that's kind of how it started, and I
Yeah.
spent the last 10 years really working in the space industry, mostly out of Europe,
Mm-hmm.
in various positions, and then right about 2 years ago, I was kind of having this existential crisis of okay. I'm the chief commercial officer of this satellite company. I'm selling satellites, but there is this thing going on, which is climate change and specifically
Mm.
global warming. And I was seeing kind of things that I used to be able to do with my father back in
Mm.
Grenoble. We have this
Yeah.
mountain close to Grenoble called l'Alpe d'Huez,
Yeah.
and it was literally like snow was melting like crazy.
Yeah.
I'm a father, and I wasn't able to do basically the things I used to be able to do with my dad back then. I
Mm.
thought, if I'm about to, if I'm going to sell satellites, I want those satellites to be useful for that specific purpose of
Right.
containing global warming. And so that's how I went on to found to create Absolut Sensing with the mission of monitoring and being able eventually to predict
Mm.
global
Oh,
warming
right.
events.
Okay, right. No, that's very interesting. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I think when you're in a region where I want to say outdoor activity is a big part of the way of life, like it is here in Grenoble, and especially with the mountains. Like you said, like this winter, I did zero winter sports because it's just like every weekend I just was like, the snow's not very good. I'm just not going to do it. And like you said, I think especially if when you were a kid, you were having those experiences and those memories with your dad up in the mountains. And now you're like, wow, I can't do that with my son or, my kids
Yeah.
because of global warming. I mean, that's like, it makes it really concrete. And you're like, wow, like it's, I think that's a lot more powerful than any numbers and statistics or even, maps that we see or pictures that we see of, like the mer de glace, which is, less and less each year. But just saying like, I can't do these things with my kids, which I was doing with my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
that
mean, for
hurts.
us, still, the impact I would say is, it's kind of leisure, which is, it's not as bad as say you're born in somewhere in Africa, and
Mm,
literally here you're seeing kind of, not being able to have access to water,
yeah.
drinkable water. You're seeing thousands of species that are, just
Mm,
going extinct, and that kind of really messes up the entire biosphere, and and,
yeah.
and as a result it's just a lot harder to live and to kind of
Yeah.
you're at the lowest level of the Maslow pyramid of kind of, how am I going to get food and drink for a day.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, that it's also a vicious problem, because like from the moment where you realize it's a problem, and you take steps, you take actions, to the moment where you see the benefits of what you've
Mm,
done, the solution you've implemented. With global warming, it takes 10 years or more to see the
yeah,
benefits of the solution. So it's kind of very tricky in this world where we live in, where it's kind of, we all live on short term stimulus, where we
yeah.
want to see very quick reward based on actions we take. So yeah, if we can contribute somewhat to this problem with absolute sensing, it's that's really the reason why the company exists.
Yeah, right. No, go. It's a fabulous mission, and yeah, I hope I just hope you guys have lots of success, because climate change and global warming, it is, I think, the big problem that we're facing now in this century, and that we got one planet. We have to make it work. We don't have a
Oh,
choice.
exactly.
So yeah, right, right. So you said that you spent some time in Kansas and in the U.S. How long were you in the U.S. for?
Well, all in all, it was right about 3 years ish,
Okay.
but I
Yeah.
spent one full year in Kansas, close to Lawrence.
Hmm.
That's where the Kansas University campus is based out of. And then I spent sometimes in New York. That was my very first job out of
Yeah.
out of college. And then now, as part of my function with Absolute Sensing, spending quite a bit of time um, in DC
Mm.
and Maryland, and then to a lesser extent on the West Coast as well,
Okay.
and
Right.
Texas, and Texas.
And
Yeah.
Texas also. Okay. Right. So very, a lot of different areas in the U.S. From what you've seen, because we often sometimes think, like we talk about the United States and Americans, et cetera, et cetera. But I know that there can be a lot of differences between the regions. Now this can depend on a lot of things, industry, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'm just curious to know what differences, if any, have you seen between Kansas, New York, Texas, West Coast, all of that?
Huh. Differences between Kansas and New York City. Let's see. Let's see.
Where do I start?
Uh,
Right.
uh, yeah, it's really funny, because it's actually, it's the same country, but really you don't feel like
Mm,
it's the same country. I think the experience very much. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the people you meet, right? Like
yeah,
you can
sure.
have a very good experience in any states, really.
Right.
And it's really a function of how good the people you meet are with you. And to me, I
Mm,
was really lucky, because
mm,
no matter in Kansas, I had a great experience. It was
yeah.
very traditional in the sense of them being very kind of I would say rooted in
Yeah.
traditions.
Sure, yeah.
And,
Yeah, because
and
Kansas is really what we call the heartland of America. So kind of that very, like you said, traditional, I don't know if we could say typically American, but yeah, definitely more traditional and perhaps less cosmopolitan than a place like New York or California or yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mm.
So it was really it was really great. And then in New York, on the other hand, I would say it was very I used to spend some time in, say, London and Paris. I,
Mm.
I didn't find it. I mean, of course, it was it was great, but I would say that it was less of a difference in terms of how people live there,
Mm.
and kind of the pace of
Right.
life. It's still higher pace, I would say, than London and Paris, but
Yeah.
it's kind of in that ballpark.
Yeah, yeah, like just
Whereas
big
Texas
city
was kind of
life.
it's like everything's running slowly, and
Yeah.
but also people actually spend time to
Yeah.
do things, and
Right.
and build relation.
Yeah.
And I really liked it about that. Like, um, it's just
Mm.
very they spend time to actually get to know you.
Yeah.
Particularly me as a student coming from France, they had no clue. What I was in a family, kind of helping me out in
Yeah.
a couple of weeks, and they were like,
Right.
"Okay, how it's like in France?"
Yeah.
And but a genuine interest in getting
Yeah.
to know uh, how it came, what was my background and all of that.
Mm.
It was great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I imagine, for example, compared to New York, there it's very international. Everybody is from somewhere else. So really, I would say if you're like the French person in New York, you don't really stand out. Whereas if you're the French person in Lawrence, Kansas, you're kind of like the, the exotic person, like, wow, this person's from France and what is that
Exactly.
like?
Yeah.
And so very curious. And I know I'm from Mississippi, which I would say is probably more similar to Kansas than to New York in the sense it's very sort of traditional, not so cosmopolitan. And when we would go back home with my ex-husband who is French as well, people would always they're like, wow, you're from France and what is it like there? And then they would be like, parlez-vous français? And he's like, yeah, I speak French. I'm French. What do you expect? So yeah, it's a, but like you said, it's good because in those smaller areas, people will, take more time and things are slower compared to in the big cities like New York, where, in English, we have that expression, a New York minute, to talk about something that goes very, very, very fast. So, right. And what about your experience in Texas? Because I think Texas is maybe the victim of a lot of stereotypes and things
Yeah.
like that. What was your experience?
I think it was out of all of the places I've been to in the U.S. It was the one where I saw the biggest gap between kind of the stereotype and the
Mm,
actual the reality of it. Because
okay.
it's kind of like it's okay, so it's cowboys and and
Yeah.
people have
Right. Yeah.
guns and they're very kind of this traditional Republican
Yeah.
and all of that. But the
Mm,
reality is, I mean, again, perhaps it was just me and my experience, but
sure.
it was not that. It was like there were a lot of people really interested in doing good.
Mm,
Specifically in Texas, they have. I think we tend to see it as kind of place where technology doesn't happen
yeah.
versus say California, but actually
Right.
there is a lot of deep technology that's being developed in Texas.
Mm,
They're aware of specifically when it comes to global warming,
yeah.
the potential that they have at state level to kind of
Mm,
you know, do something about it
right.
without, of course, kind of, you want to preserve jobs and making sure that, you continue to have, you don't want to oppose basically growth,
Mm,
whether it's the oil and gas industry or another industry, with preserving the environment. And I think now we're
mm,
at a stage with the technology development that we don't have to oppose those. And so,
right.
they're ready to essentially implement, methane capture technologies, for
Sure.
example, and things to essentially have a lesser impact on the environment. Because, as you know,
Mm,
Texas is kind of the Permian Basin specifically is kind of where the bulk of methane emissions
right.
come from in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they were very like people I met there. They were genuinely they wanted to do good. And,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and make sure that they took steps. So I would say, yeah,
Mm,
it's to me it's, and also I really like the kind of the, I would say the freedom bit of it. I mean, in
yeah.
terms of the conversation I had,
Yeah.
off business, they are very, free speech and
Mm,
kind of on these, American values, at least what I
yeah.
see as American values of around, free speech,
Right.
entrepreneurship, and all of that. No, I love Kansas, frankly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Kansas or Texas?
Texas, sorry.
Texas. You
Yeah.
maybe both, hey, so
Very
there's
cool. Yeah,
something to love
very
in
cool.
all the states, right? Yeah. But then but that is very interesting because I would, like you said, the sort of image that we have of, the guy in Texas is kind of cowboy,
Hmm.
doesn't really, the environment. They're like, "Hey, what's that? I just want to drive my big truck and go shoot things." Which I would say even for Americans, that's kind of the stereotype that we have of Texas as well. But like you said, depending on where you're at in Texas and who you're interacting with, uh, that could be a very different experience. And where exactly were you in Texas?
Well, a couple of places, but I would say Austin
Yeah.
was where I spent most time.
Mm,
So yeah, I would say also it's very different. Say when I went to Kansas and then later on New York, I was just student and then fresh grad.
right.
It's not the same experience you're gonna have as a student and fresh grad versus you coming in as a CEO of a
Sure.
company, doing things. It's kind of
Yeah.
it's different in that aspect as well.
Mm. Yeah, and Austin, for me, Austin is the next Silicon Valley because there's so much going on there. There, like you said, there's so many deep tech companies and big industries and things like that, and a lot of even a lot of very well known, let's say, entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial gurus and things like Tim Ferriss and things like that are have actually gone and moved to Austin. So I feel like Austin is going to be the hot place to be, if it's not already the hot place to be. So that's very interesting. So, and you said that when you go into a place as a student versus as a CEO of a company, it's not the same experience. I can say definitely, from my experience, same thing. I came to France as a student and then I built up my company. And of course you don't look at things with the same eyes. You don't have the same perspective, the same experience. Now, I'm curious to know, how did you how did you get your business into the US? Because you went over as a student, and then did you come back to France and you created your company and you went back to the US? Or yeah, how did you get your business into the
Yeah,
US?
sure. Yeah, no, essentially, so from the moment where I essentially finished my MBA and then I had my first job at it was called Newspace Global. It was a New York-based market analyst kind of boutique company helping
Mhm.
investors do due diligence on
Right.
so-called new space companies,
Yeah.
was kind of the upcoming new space companies like
Mhm.
SpaceX.
Yeah.
But then essentially for the next 8 years, I didn't have much, business relationship with the US.
Hmm.
I went back there because I had friends that I
Sure.
had made, from my time at Kansas. So every now and then, saying, once a year I would go back. But
Mm.
really, it started again for me when I built up Absolute Sensing,
Yeah.
and there was obviously the need for Absolute Sensing to go and help support the
Mm.
US in their greenhouse gas reduction plans. So
Right.
specifically, there was something regulation called the Inflation Reduction Act, and as part
Yeah.
of that, there is essentially pots of money that financing available to companies that
Hmm.
want to invest in technologies to reduce their methane emissions. And then on
Right.
the other hand, for companies specifically in the oil and gas industry that just don't do enough, then
Mm.
they pay a tax. And so my
Right.
company is there to help measure, which player is emitting what amount of emissions, and as a
Hmm.
result, calculate kind of potential tax, or on the other
Okay.
hand, incentives, kind of financial incentives,
Right.
because they were good players. So it started back in I would say first business trip specifically on this topic was about a year and a half ago,
Okay. Yeah.
and then it went really quickly.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say, so I was like, wow, that sounds like things went really fast. But I think that's what a lot of people say about business in the US is that it goes pretty fast.
yeah, I mean, I would differentiate though between kind of the government time
Mm,
frame and
yeah,
then the commercial time frame. These
right.
are not the same.
I think
Uh,
all countries that yeah, it's there's public and there's private, and they don't quite run on the same schedules.
Yeah. Although I must say, I mean, I was expecting a lot more, red tape
Mm,
in the US, but actually it went quite smoothly. So
mm,
when it comes to specifically this topic of methane emission monitoring via satellite, there are a couple of federal agencies that are on the topic. There is NASA,
right.
of course. There is NOAA. There is the
Mm,
EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency as well. So meeting them and understanding what they wanted from us
mm,
uh, as a provider of data. That process took a good part of a year. But
Okay.
it was very smooth. And I think one of the things we did well was that early on I realized that it was very important to have a partner there, in that of
Yes. Mm.
U.S. citizen that would be able to kind of bridge between us
Mm.
and our American counterparts.
Right.
Because I mean, even if I've been there, and my English is kind of okay, there is still this element of you're not you're not a U.S. citizen.
Right. You're not the
So
insider. You kind of need that insider to guide you. And just a question about that. The person or the agent, was it like a single person or perhaps a company that you contracted with
it
to
was a single person.
a
It's a
single
single person.
person?
Yeah.
Okay, right, right, right. And that person, were they familiar with I don't know, France or Europe or just no, but they were willing to explain to you this is how we do things here in the US.
Yeah, not really. That person wasn't really particularly, I would say, fluent in terms of understanding the
Mm,
cultural differences between, say, France and the
right.
U.S. However, it was a big expert on that topic, the business
Mm,
topic
yeah.
of methane emissions, and then navigating the federal agencies relation between state level and
Mm,
federal level, all of that stuff, which I think is very important for a company that does, like ours, that does business to business, and then a
right.
big portion of the B is government business.
Right.
So that's why I thought this would be kind of the critical path, in terms of it would be slow to engage with our government counterparts in the U.S. So we started this process of getting that person on board fairly quickly.
Mm,
And on the contrary, on the commercial side of things, we didn't really need that, because we could just have
mm,
direct one-on-one conversations with companies that are interested in
right.
monitoring their methane emissions, and it was very fast, just by the
Mm,
nature of companies being more agile than before.
right. Then yeah, sure. Where there's lots of, procedures and paperwork and perhaps layers of, the approval process and things like that. And in the commercial relationships that you had with the I guess the American companies, any was it what were the things that were surprising, shocking, unexpected in those relationships? And it could be positive or negative, but compared to if you were doing business perhaps with a company here in France, um, any big differences that you noticed?
But I guess what was most shocking was that there wasn't really many differences. I was
Okay, yeah,
expecting, quite a, kind of a, French company. What's that about? And
right, yeah,
you know, and but really no, it was kind of very smooth.
mm,
So I would say that one thing that's important is to kind of show that you have a real plan for
mm,
getting into the U.S.
right,
And showing your customers that you're not kind of this cold calling them, and it's going to be a one-off transaction, and you're trying
mm,
to rip their eyes off. It's really a long term thing, and
right,
for us, the American play really is a long term play. We
yeah,
intend to invest quite a bit of money into the U.S. So yeah, I think it's about, once you get the initial trust going.
mm-hmm,
Then it's very similar to experience I would have with, say, a uh,
mm,
French company. There are
right,
still, I would say, nuances in terms of slight cultural
sure.
differences that pops up every now
Yeah,
and then, but it's very minor.
right, sure. And in the for the question of, building trust, because that is a question that I get very often, like, how do I build trust with my American clients or my American prospects? What was there anything that you remembered that you did, or how did you do that actually? How did you win their trust?
Well, for us, I guess maybe it's very business specific, but it was about first showing that we're working a lot with the scientific community
Hmm.
and the regulators,
Right.
and that basically we kind of, uh, they've looked at our technology, and there is kind of this validation that we're not, that we're legit.
Mm,
So I think that was the biggest part. Because obviously, for them, it's, if the regulators and the science community says these guys are legit, we're
mm,
gonna put them on this list of companies that can do monitoring of methane emissions,
Right.
then it's kind of that's the step one. That's kind of the prerequisites for doing
Mm,
business with these companies. But I would say then that building trust. I mean, one of the things that's different between how, at least again, my experience of
yeah.
building relationship with the U.S. versus a French person is that
Mm,
a French person will not trust you initially.
mm,
Then it will be your job to show them that you can be trustworthy,
right.
uh, versus almost all of the interactions I had with and still friends I have in the
Yeah.
U.S. They trusted me initially,
Right.
and then it was like, if you screw up, then that's going to go away.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think that the trust level initially, right at the start of the relationship, is just a way higher in the
Mm.
U.S.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And that's what I always tell people, that, that's one of the big differences is that in France, people are going to be a little, wary of you to start, and then you've got to win their trust. Whereas in the US, people, until they don't have a reason to trust you, they're going to
Yeah.
trust you pretty much. Yeah, right. Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Which is, I think, positive because it means that kind of opens the door for you to show them that they can continue trusting and that maybe it's a bit easier to build up that relationship. Speaking of relationships, you mentioned NASA. Now, NASA is, I think, very impressive for a lot of people. That's kind of, we think of NASA putting a man on the moon and things like that. How did you actually get to meet NASA or someone from NASA?
Well, it was really a natural process. So we were invited at a workshop organized by Harvard University as part of
Hmm.
this group of experts in satellite-based methane monitoring,
Okay.
and there were people from NASA, and so
Mm,
we essentially started off engaging there. And then I would say the space industry is very small in that. Everyone tends to know each
right.
other. It's not like there's millions of companies,
Right. Yeah.
uh, serious companies. So it was pretty smooth. But then, we had a bilab between the U.S. and France, organized by a respective delegation, and so I
Mm,
was invited as part of this
okay.
bilateral. So it was like 2 months ago now.
Right.
And so there, I got to meet actually my counterparts that I had been discussing with over the
Mm,
phone for the
yeah.
past, 18 months. And it's also very important, I think, is that we tend to, in this kind of post-COVID
Mm,
era, um, you know, don't not put enough importance on face-to-face
mm,
meeting, and I think it's
right.
very important.
Yeah.
There's only so much rapport you can build, via phone call. So
Right. Yeah. Over the phone or over a Zoom call or things
yeah,
like that. And it's, no, I agree. And yeah. And it's that, I think that also goes to show, just how powerful, getting out there and meeting people and networking can be. I mean, it can get you, contacts in these big, industry, companies such as, or institutions rather, like NASA or NOAA and things like that. Yeah. Right. Okay. So, were there any mistakes that you made along the way in getting into the US or once you were there that you would like to share with us just so we can, learn from, it's always good to learn from mistakes. Any that you made that you want to share with us?
um, I think we made tons of mistakes, and we're still making mistakes to this day.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
So yeah, but I'm trying to think one in
Mm,
particular that would be helpful. Mm, I mean, I guess not having uh, not having someone there, like
mm,
physically present, like
right.
a consultant that eventually you know uh, we onboarded.
Mm,
Um, Essentially the first 6 months of interaction without that person were kind of wasted. So I would
okay.
say
Right.
I would definitely recommend any business that has really B2B a B2B focus,
Mm,
to very much try and start figuring out, finding someone that can be of help in
Mm,
understanding, the ecosystem in the
right.
US, and then having the right network to put you in touch with the right person.
Mm,
So, that I would say was very important. Now, obviously, there is the element of how do you find that person, and
right.
to
Yeah.
me, it was kind of very nice that I had done my MBA in the US, because
Yeah.
then, via this network, I was able to get someone who knew that
Yeah.
person.
Exactly.
Uh, and so there's that. So I would say, maybe a tip is, if you can spend, even a year, or even like 6 months in the US
Yeah.
as part of your college,
Yeah.
degree or whatever, do it.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're
Right.
French or European, particularly if you're French, because I think
Yeah.
there is this love-hate relationship
Yeah.
between our countries that kind
Yep.
of stems
Yep.
from
Definitely.
history. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's I think that's really good. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times, what I've seen is people start off and they think, oh, I can do this on my own, I can do it alone, etc. Whether it's because they don't know who to reach out to, maybe they don't have the budget to take on someone as a consultant or sort of a partner or something like that, or they just think, no, I've done my business for 10 years here in France, I can do it myself over there. But I think that's like you said, trying to do that alone is you're going to waste, like you
Yeah.
said, maybe that first 6 months, and as time is money. So, yeah,
It's
right.
particularly important, I think, in with in the recent times, with kind of this emphasis both in the U.S. and in France as
Mm,
well, and in a number of countries, of kind of, national interest first,
mm,
Buy American
right.
Act, say, in the U.S., and then we've got some sort of an equivalent in France.
Mm,
You want to be able to have, to understand what that actually translates
right.
into your industry, and
Right.
how, kind of what's the impact for you, and really,
Mm,
when you get there, you understand, actually it's not that big of a deal, as long as you do it the proper way,
right.
and you partner with, in our case, we partner with US companies as well. And
Mm,
so yeah, so no, I think it's really important to have, really someone there quickly, and then
mm.
can grow from there.
Yeah, right. Kind of, bridge the gap there. And yeah, very interesting. Okay, great. And just to finish up, is there anything that you or your company are looking for now that you would like to throw out there and see if maybe that message lands in the right ears?
Well, I would say we're always looking to recruit great people.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. Like, at the end of the day, a company is, it's people working
Yeah,
together to achieve a goal that they believe in. So I
right.
think, if there are people that think global warming is really an issue, and something that they want to help, tackle, then
Mm,
send over your resume.
awesome.
And
Yeah.
then I would say, I mean, as I said, we're planning on expanding it in the US.
Mm,
So that will require investment. So if people also want to help with
yeah.
the investment part,
Yeah.
we're also interested in any financial partners in that.
All right, great. Yeah, great. And so if someone wants to perhaps check out your company, send over their resume, look into investing in your company, how can they find you and how can they connect with you?
So it's very simple. They just go online. So our website, www.absolutesensing.com,
Mhm.
and then, go to the careers website, and
Right.
you'll find an email address. So that, or just via LinkedIn, really. So I kind of, we met over LinkedIn,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I tend of, I receive quite a lot of resume via LinkedIn, which
Mm,
I can send over to smart people in my team who can
yeah.
then,
Right.
look over them.
Okay, great, great. And yeah, and I'll put the links to your website, to that careers page, and the link to your LinkedIn profile so that anybody who's listening and they want to reach out, it just makes that very easy to do. All
All
right.
right, awesome.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Have a lovely day. And yeah, very interesting. Thank you for sharing your story, your experience, and talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Tristan. Have a good one.